Kimberly, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, so excited to be here.
Yes. So I like to start every interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Ooh, yummy question. Well, we were just talking about Texas. I used to live in Texas as a kid in elementary school. That was where we were at the time. And I remember thinking I really wanted to be a teacher. Every single teacher I had in
Oh,
Texas was just like the best person ever, just so loving, so nurturing. I
mm.
was like, I want to be like Mrs. Betty. No, I want to be like Mrs. McKinney. Like every grade, it would switch to my different teacher. I would be the first grade teacher. No, second grade. No, fourth grade. And then by the time we left Texas and went up north in junior high and high school, it kind of shifted for me. I kind of found myself being more drawn towards like psychology and social sciences and almost this,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I found like, okay, yeah, I actually really like learning about the mind or even just like the body. Like I started becoming more of a dancer. I used to be a gymnast and switched into dancing after an injury and found like kind of more of this instead of being an elementary school teacher. I felt like, no, I think I want to be multiple things.
Yes.
And like
Yes.
I found a lot of love and passion for dance, for psychology, for mindset stuff, body work, and teaching. So all of those
Mm.
things kind of fell into my lap more so around college. I think it started though with the root, which is that teacher element of like wanting to give information or give knowledge to those who are craving that, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
And well, that leads me to my next question, which is, what do you do today? And how do you
Mm.
think that connects to
Ooh,
being a
yes.
teacher,
Yes.
dancer, all of that?
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, I'm a business coach and energy healer for entrepreneurs, and I definitely think it's connected, especially because of the way that coaching is done. There's a lot of questions and guidance, of course, but also a lot of information and insight and tips that as coaches, like we definitely have had years of experience in whatever field we're coaching in. And just this afternoon, I noticed myself becoming the teacher with one of my clients and be like, yep,
Mm,
I would do this one, two, three, ABC. Like it just is a very similar layout, I would say, of the teaching profession. Different, of course, like the audience is different, the curriculum is different. And at the same time, there's something that is underlying all of that, where just this desire to help and to serve and to give anything that will make someone's life easier or more
mm,
rich with whether that's knowledge or again with energy healing too, like rich with this feeling of sense of safety or sense of peace in the body. Like there's so many ways to impart that. And I think the teacher energy comes through all of it.
mm.
Yeah.
I love that. So, how did you end up like in this role today? Right. So, business
Yeah.
coach, energy healing, right?
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
well, especially the two combined, I think, is not like as common as being a teacher at a school, right? So, how did you end up here today? What did
Right.
you study in school? Like, how did you get to today?
Well, I noticed a lot of the passions that I had exploding while I was in college. And I had two majors, three minors, among them
Mm,
international studies, dance, psychology,
mm,
sociology, even like Spanish, because I tested out because I'm half Mexican. I was like, whatever, I'll get whatever minor, major,
yep.
degree type five for Spanish. It's like, yeah, sure. Spanish literature is also something that like doesn't necessarily happen with like your parents. I learned a lot. And I found all of those like elements being really, really exciting to me. Latin America, travel, dance. And I was like, how am I going to form anything out of all of these things? Like, does something like this even exist? And I fell
Mm,
upon this organization that did international dance exchanges. It's like this nonprofit that funded international dance education. And essentially, one of the income generating arms is like you bring people from the US over into this country, Panama at the time, and then they've also done Brazil and India while I was working there. I fell into a job at that organization pretty much. So it blended everything Spanish, international studies, dance, psychology, sociology, literally everything. And I'm like, you
wow.
guys, like a lot of my friends in college were like, how did you, like, I was like, I don't know, it fell into my lap. I fell into it. I don't know. Like it felt like the dream job and
Mm,
the dream job. I felt like I was going to be there for the rest of my life. And upon getting the executive directorship position because the founder was going back to school, I was so excited. And I had this nudge or this feeling inside, and maybe you felt this with your path as well. Like it's exciting. And also, I don't know if this is it. Like it felt a little like something was missing. And so I moved abroad and was in charge of operations internationally, but also domestically in the US, and hiring, firing, everything, like marketing, everything. I was doing a bunch of things, becoming essentially trained as an entrepreneur because it's still 5 years old organization, very much a startup culture. And I think in year 1 or 2 of that, so maybe probably 2017 or 16, 2016, I was like, I think I need to talk to my boss, to the founder. It's like, I had a conversation with her. Hey, I don't know if this is going to be forever for me. And of course, she was hoping that, yeah, like maybe I would take the reins for longer and maybe stay there for a decade. And I was just like, I just don't think that's my path. And so started training somebody else who was my kind of my right wing woman. And yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I started reflecting during that time. I was like, what about this felt right to me or felt like my real self coming through to the table? And one of those things was when we did have these dancers, pre-professional or professional dancers, come down to experience an exchange with this different country and the cultural exchange, the experience. There's a lot of like open doors that happen during that time for people. Like, I never realized that, like, even if I don't speak the language, I can communicate. I never realized that I could maybe do this as a profession. A lot of light bulbs would happen for people that I found myself being really drawn to, and also being really drawn to the conversations that would make it even lighter and brighter. So that to me was my first experience with coaching in a realm that wasn't academic coaching, because I actually was an academic coach also during my college career. So it was kind of all throughout that 20s era. It was all planted in there. And looking back, of course, you can kind of see the breadcrumbs. But at the time, I still was like, what am I going to do when I leave this job? So I left with a little bit of an idea that, yeah, I think I want to be a life coach for women. I didn't really know what kinds of women or what kinds of coaching other than the general niche of life coaching. And I felt called to do it on my own and start my own thing. I think the part that was missing for me in that position was, even though I had so much range of what I could do and deciding when to do it and how to do it, it still wasn't mine. It wasn't my project. It wasn't something that was born through me, and it needed to come from within. Like, it needed to come from my soul. And that's not necessarily the case for everybody. I think if you love your job and you love the career you're in, and you don't necessarily have to be the founder of the company, that's great. At the same time, if you feel like this nudge of like, I just feel like there's something within that has to come through me specifically and start here and end here, that's something to listen to, because that's kind of where I was being guided at that time. And so life coaching, from there, I realized the clients that I loved working with the most were the ones that had businesses. From the business coaching spectrum, I noticed the ones that I loved working with the most were actually somewhat spiritual and open to doing some energy healing with me. And energy healing is something that I think I've had a past life in as a medicine woman. So it just really like channeled through, and wasn't something that I was necessarily trained in for years or anything like that. But the power of energy healing just kind of came through in a lot of these sessions. And I had a little bit of training before starting to do it, but definitely not like enough to really be like, yeah, 1, 2, 3, ABC, this is what I'm doing right at the very beginning. Now I have like some people that have been trained under me. Like, it's just kind of something that flowed through as I built this brand and business from the ground up, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm seeing like a common thread of you listening to your intuition, to your gut, to following that. Was there any point where you had any doubts or felt scared, or like going, because yes, you were at a startup, but it was still an organization, like leaving and doing your own thing, or even listening to your gut, but then thinking maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this isn't the right path for me. And then two, the energy piece, I think that is not as common, at least in where I am in the space I'm in. It's not as common. I don't hear about it as much. And I've had on the podcast someone who's an intuitive guide, and that was a fascinating conversation, and
Mm.
Stephen Ross. And how were you even open to that? Because that seems more out there than, like, for example, being a teacher, right? Or being even
Yeah.
a business coach.
Yeah.
That seems a little scarier to follow. And that's a
Mhm.
very long-winded question.
But I love it. And I think that the answers are actually related. I'll start with the energy stuff
Yep.
a little bit, and I
Yep.
think it'll come into the fears and the doubts, etc. So energy, in the way that I see it, there's an energetic body, an emotional body, a physical body, and even some people might say there's different other than that. For me, energetic body is linked to the physical body like a lot. And so when we feel fears or doubts or anger, a lot of times we'll have a physical somatic response to that. I think with all my time as a dancer and being so in tune with my body and being so just knowledgeable about what is happening within the body, like this hurts or this doesn't, or this stretch is
Mm,
amazing, or this one, I don't really know. Being a little bit more aware of the
mm,
somatics in your body really helps to open up the energetic awareness. That's what I've seen, not just for myself, but also people who have been picking it up over the time of working with me or even just on their own. I notice that people who are more somatically aware tend to be more energetically aware too, because energetics really do inform somatics in a lot of cases. And so with that
and for
being,
someone who
yeah,
doesn't know what somatics means.
yeah, somatics. So think of soma, like the root word of that. Soma means body. So somatics is
Mm,
essentially the mechanism of the body, the mechanisms of the body. So if you roll your shoulder back, there's sensation that comes from that most people
mm,
will feel, even if it's subtle, even if it's just a
mm,
little bit, like you just kind of feel a little bit of a stretch, maybe under the shoulder or within the joint. You kind of feel stuff there. So it's how your body as a vessel moves through the world
mm,
and the mechanisms behind the body. And so, with somatic awareness, with body awareness, essentially, that being linked to energetic stuff happens when you notice how you're feeling before an important call. Like, let's say, for example, that call before I was speaking with my boss about potentially leaving, I was feeling it here in my heart space like like it felt like a dense ball of energy. And I also
mm,
felt it in my stomach. And it felt like it was like coming into my body. Like it was like my stomach was flipping. There
mm.
was that type of somatic symptom that I noticed before that important call. And I think probably anybody who's listening has had some sort of similar experience with energy or emotions, even because
Mm.
energy really is just emotions. Like emotions are energy in motion. And with those types of difficult conversations or scenarios or situations, or you get a call and you're like, oh my God, there's a lot of stuff that's happening in the body. Like something will be caught in your throat. We say these
Mm,
things all the time of like, my hands are sweating, or there's something on my chest. I just have to get it off my chest. There's truly all of this
mm,
language informing us about the energetics of our emotions and our physicality. So it's not so out there when we look at it that way. And
mm,
I also think
mhm,
that when you're able to tune into the energy that comes up around, I want to quadruple my prices, or I want to get in the media, or I want to come out as a spiritual coach, healer, whatever, because that's also coming out of the spiritual closet can bring up a lot of stuff, like you mentioned as well. So, what I would like to offer for people listening is whenever you feel something like that, tuning in, placing a finger on that part of the body and just staying with it for about 90 seconds, that will really help it either subside or expand if it needs to, and just letting it course through the body as it's meant to. Yawning is really good for energetic release as well. So if you
mm.
find yourself yawning and like you're like emotionally overwhelmed, or you just feel like you have to kind of yawn for no reason, that's actually a great expeller of energy that's not working for you as well.
Hmm. Oh, that's fascinating. That's a great explanation. That was beautiful. If someone's interested in kind of dipping their toe into learning more about energy, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting what Kimberly's talking about.
Yeah.
Like, you mentioned kind of that one exercise of putting your finger
Mhm.
maybe on your chest if that's where you're kind of feeling the energy. What else could people do? Or maybe even to what do you see as the benefit of
Mm.
having that awareness? of our energy.
Right. So this ties back into the first question, I think, because I definitely did feel feelings of doubt, fear, all of those things, the spectrum
Yeah.
of emotions moving into entrepreneurship. And the benefit of moving through it when it's in the body and you feel it at the
Yeah.
surface is that it clears. And some of
Mm.
the time it clears really fast. And sometimes you have to go back and rework the area or the energetics around the area. But most of the time, when you are able to do it and have a moment where you're just telling it, hey, like, it's okay, you don't have to change or go away. Like, I'm here to just be with you. Like, there's something within
Mm.
energetically that just wants to be noticed and heard. And the body, I like to say this too, maybe our minds are in a space of, yeah, I'm ready to like charge X amount or Y amount, but our bodies freak out at the even the idea of that. We need to take a little bit of time for our bodies and our energy to catch up with the really, really fast moving spirals of the mind. And one way to do that is to, yeah, just tune in and make sure that we're all in line and we're all in agreement. Like, everyone's voices has been heard. The energy doesn't feel like it's just been left off to the side or ignored. And
Mm.
when we ignore something, like what we resist persists. And that's one of the baselines of energetic healing or transmutation is understanding that anything that you're pushing away or ignoring or putting under the carpet tends to get either deeper, bigger, more difficult over time. And so the benefit then is when we're able to catch it in the moment and see, okay, this is like a small little bead of energy that feels a little tense. I'm going to pull it out. Like, this is something that people can do as well. You pull out energy from that area.
And then what
And
Kimberly's doing is kind of
yeah,
doing the motion of like pulling something
like
from her chest.
totally. I call this the pinch and pull. So it's just you pinch it and pull it out, or you can corkscrew it out. I say, like, that's almost like putting your finger, if you have a headache, for example, you can put your finger to the temple or whatever part of like the third eye or the crown, whatever part of your head that's hurting, and spiral the energy out with your finger. And a lot of people don't realize that they can do stuff like that, mainly because our hands have been left out of the equation. But when you think about the hand, the one place that animals or people will put their hands on is like the place that's hurting or the place that's like, my
Mm.
knee doesn't feel great, and they'll kind of put their hand there automatically. And your hands actually have really potent healing powers. I have a lot of theories around why, but mostly because if you look at like the wingspan, one thing that connects your left arm to your right arm is the heart in the middle, which has a lot of energetic power and capacity to
Mm.
heal. And so
Mm.
your hands are one of the most direct parts of the body to the heart and can channel that energy of the heart into whatever body part you're working with. And the benefit, again, of that is that you overcome these sometimes energetic, but sometimes physical obstacles that are keeping you from feeling pain free or feeling totally abundant or feeling courageous enough to do something. And I've even had people that had immense pain after like a hysterectomy or something along those lines. And then you just do 90 seconds, we literally like 90 seconds of just staying with that. And this doesn't like necessarily mean that it's going to be the case all the time, but I've just seen it be, oh, okay, it's gone now. And like months after, still gone. It's really interesting to see how such short moments of awareness and energetic healing can transmute energy that's been painful, even like just something that's like
Mm.
really changing the way that you live. So, in order to have one of the best lives that you can have and have it be this beautiful, expansive where your whole body feels open, I think energetic hygiene is something that everybody, whether they know it or not, they're doing. When you take a shower, it shifts the energy. Anything
Mm.
like tapping, if people have heard of tapping or emotional freedom technique, like that's shifting the energy to acupuncture and massage shifts the energy. There's also just really light ways to shift the energy that are a little more subtle. It's like using the hands as an example of that. And also just like putting the hands like this towards somebody, like palms stretched towards the person. There's so many different subtle ways to move energy because energy is super malleable. And it's something that, again, it's not something to fear. It's not something to be confused by, but more like to be guided by. of like, where am I feeling this in the body is one of the biggest questions that I always go back to when I think of how I'm doing on my own, but also what's happening with my people.
Oh, that's fascinating. I have a lot of questions for myself and for the audience. Okay, so let's say someone is maybe about to have a tough conversation with their manager, kind of like you were with the founder before you were
Mhm.
about to leave. Or we have a business owner who maybe is going to raise their prices, something challenging.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, they're feeling something in their body. Like their mind is saying, I'm ready to raise my prices, or I'm ready to have the promotion conversation with my manager boss. And yet there's this feeling they're feeling in their body where maybe their body hasn't caught up, like you said, to their mind.
Mhm.
What do you do in that instance? Right. So you mentioned kind of maybe putting your hand or your where you're feeling that feeling. And then do you wait until your body feels like, what do you do then? Like,
Right. In that scenario, the one question is like, okay, where do you feel, number one, where do you feel in your body? Placing a hand, or even if you're super aware and attuned to where it is, maybe even a fingernail, depending on
mm,
how close and specific you think it is. From there, number two, on a scale of 1 to 10, how intense is it? One being, yeah, it's there, but it's like nothing that's going to stop me. Or 10, like, I think I'm going to like pee my pants. Like I'm
yes.
so scared or nervous, like I'm shaking. It feels really, really intense. And so once you determine the level that you're at, and let's say it's a 7 or even a 5, we're just stay with it. Checking in a minute or so, even 30 seconds after, like, okay, after a few breaths, after like touching it for a little bit with my fingers, maybe even doing a few of the pinch and pulls that Kimberly was talking about, and maybe you don't know what you're doing. And that's part of how I got into it in the first place. I didn't necessarily, quote unquote, know what I was doing. I was being guided by my hands. And to keep it simple, the pinch and pull is great. Even the
Okay.
hand on the body is great. There's no need to try to tap into universal source consciousness or anything at that moment. It's like you're really just trying to stay with the feeling and be present
Yeah.
to the feeling. And so after 30 seconds, 60 seconds, you check in. Okay, let's see where we are now. Maybe that 7 went to a 4 or a 3, or maybe it went up like at an 8 or a 9. That's also normal. It's probably happens about maybe 20% of the time. So it's not bad, like if that happens to you, because what we're doing is essentially poking the bear a little bit energetically. Like, let's see what's under here. And sometimes that does activate it a little bit more. And sometimes it lowers the activation. We just don't really know until we're in it. I will say this, with anything that's particularly traumatic or just activating for you, I would seek like professional support and guidance with that, maybe from somebody who either is a somatic therapist or a trauma informed healer of some sort. I would suggest guidance. But with normal, quote unquote, normal things that feel like everyday items on
Yeah.
the calendar, this is definitely a great way to just find the rooting and the grounding in your body and have your mind and your body speaking to each other again through the energetics that are flowing through it. So yeah, number 2 is the scale, like 1 to 10, what feels like where you're at right now. And then number 3, after about 90 seconds, decide if you want to continue or if you want to like let it go for now. If you do continue, there is a high chance that it'll resolve on its own. But there's also something that one of my mentors called meta processing, which is like 24 hours after the initial healing is done, it's still kind of integrating and incubating in the background. And so your body has basically started the process of healing and will finish up the work over the next 24 hours. Again, that's something that for me, I haven't felt super viscerally, but for some people, it's like, oh, yeah, the next day I just woke up. Like sometimes, like for example, yesterday I had a little bit of pain in my ankle. I did some energy healing on it. It was like not good at that moment, but I'm like, okay, it's okay. Like all good. Spent the rest of the day just kind of like icing and making sure I'm like not doing anything weird. And then I slept on it and then it's fine the next day. So it can really depend on the person. But I think that normally with something like that, that's a little more everyday or common, it could definitely resolve within 90 seconds if you stay really present. And when I say stay present, it's not just like, oh, I'm touching my fingers and like, and I can do whatever with my mind. Really, with the mind, you sinking into, okay, what are the shapes of this space? What are the sensations behind it? Sometimes it's prickly or tingly or burning or cool to the touch. There's always these physical, specific sensations behind it that we can get even more in depth with. And if you can go really deep inside the body and even feel the insides of your body with your awareness of like where exactly around this heart chakra space is it, on the surface, or is it in the middle, or is it in the back of the body?
Mm.
So number one, where is it in the body? Number two, on a scale of 1 to 10, how intense is it? And number three, where, like, and what is happening? Like, this is what are the sensations showing up that
Mm.
maybe might feel different than somebody else's sensations?
Oh, that's interesting. So, a couple things. So, one is the thought that was coming up for me is how connected our mind and our bodies are. And so, when I was working at a big firm, when in my prior career as an auditor, accounting person, I didn't feel aligned with, I didn't feel a sense of fulfillment, all of that. And I was working really long hours and really stressed out under a
Mm.
lot of pressure. And I had horrible headaches that wouldn't go away. I was taking these really strong pills for the pain. And then I left the firm. And then 2 weeks later, the headaches were gone. And then I've had someone on the podcast who was getting his PhD. He had a car wreck happen. He had kids, like he had a lot of digestive issues, stomach issues that wouldn't go away. He was at the Mayo Clinic and they said, "How stressed are you?" And he said, "Oh my God, I didn't come all the way to the Mayo Clinic for you to tell me it was just stress." I met someone who once told me that she was really stressed out in college, hated the school she was in, and she had hiccups for a year.
A year?
Yes, a
Oh,
year.
wow.
So I just think it's interesting because most people, or a lot of people, are not aware we're not aware of our bodies and how our mind connects to our bodies. And I just get a sense that there's so much we could do on our own. And so you just talking about this, it's just kind of bringing that up for me of like, oh, there's so much we could probably do. And that what you said about accepting instead of resisting, I think there's a lot of truth in that in a lot of things in life. So that was one thought. And then the second thought is like, I just want to make sure we're clear. We're not saying we're going to treat everything, like not go to the doctor or, right? Because I know somebody might be
Right.
skeptical and listen and say, well, is Kimberly saying I shouldn't go to the doctor? And I'm just going to, right? Like, we don't want to, like, what are your thoughts as you kind of hear all of that?
Oh, definitely go to the doctor. I think that some things are really rooted in the physical, some things are really rooted in the emotional, and some things are really rooted in the energetic. In the example that I explained with this kind of painful post hysterectomy experience, it was energetic for her. Like, this wasn't
Mm,
a physical root for her experience. And I think it takes, if you feel like you've gone to the doctor so many times and they're not resolving the issue, sometimes it really does matter to look into the energetics behind that. So
mm,
chronic anything chronic, I would definitely look into the energetics behind that, whether that's on your own or with somebody who specializes in working with energy in some way. And the doctors are amazing. I love doctors. I love them so much. They have so much knowledge. And at the same time, sometimes the fixes that they give are very much like for the branches of the root issue. And I think because of that, you really have to have a three-pronged approach. And when I say three-pronged, it's like you go to the doctor, get your regular checkups, please get your cancer screenings if that's like an age that you're at, and all the other things, like feel your breasts if you're a woman, like stuff like please do all those things. And I'll also say this. Okay, yeah, the other two prongs. So physical, emotional, energetic, right? So kind of just so we're on the same page. My tia Laura, so my aunt Laura, we saw each other last year in January, and we were kind of doing a lot of things for my abuelos because my abuela was not well. My abuelita passed like 10 years ago, so she's been gone for a while, but my abuelo, I still call it like she's still around. Like, she guides me a lot in my business. She's like one of my
and
best.
abuelita is grandmother.
Yeah, sorry. Yes. Abuelita's grandmother, my grandma Blanca Rosa, which translates to white rose. Like, white roses abound when she's speaking to me. And we were helping both of them. So my abuelo and my abuela, my grandparents, we were just helping them kind of clear out the house because we knew that my abuelo, my grandpa, was not going to be around for much longer. And so we were both there. And she's like, she is Reiki certified. She loves Reiki. The type of energy healing that I do isn't necessarily Reiki. It's very similar. Again, past life as a medicine woman, I can't really tell you exactly how I do what I do or why I do it. All I know is I think it comes from a Latin American or Native American type of energy healing. That's the sense that I get.
Yeah. So your Aunt Laura, is she
Yes.
Mexican? Is she on your
Yes.
Mexican side? Okay.
Yeah,
And
she is.
okay. So how did she get into Reiki? Because that seems like
Right,
very
right.
like
Well,
not common.
I know, right? For these like Mexicans that are very God fearing.
That seems like really unique.
Well, here's what I'll say too. I think so. My abuelita was a closet spiritual person because I found a lot of books after she died of like Abraham Hicks and Louise Hayes and like all these. I was like, what? Abuela never told me. Like, abuela, you never told me, whatever. And so I think there was something in the
Interesting.
water, like when we were all growing up. And I
Interesting.
yeah, and there's a lot of indigenous wisdom in the Mexican tradition too, because Alejandra, who was my abuela's right hand woman, she has a lot of like basil cleansing techniques and practices that she'll use again for energy healing purposes. So if you have a bad headache or you have bad energy or whatever, you can do an egg clearing. Have you heard of this? Like, okay, yeah.
Of
So the
course.
egg thing, you pass an egg all over your body, or
Yes,
you
that's
put
some people
basil.
yeah, in Mexico for the my parents are from an area in Mexico called San Luis Potosí and in the
Same.
rural area. And it's a very common practice that if you're not feeling well, maybe someone gave you some bad energy. They call it ojo bad
Mal de
eye.
ojo or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
so people will pray and rub in, at least in our area, they'll pray and like a rosary or like Our Father, Hail Mary, and they will rub an egg or over your body, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
And that might sound really out there to someone listening who's not from
From like the
Mexico.
yeah,
Yeah, but this is a very common thing.
all over Latin America. Like I've seen it in
Interesting.
multiple countries. So this is indigenous wisdom in my like that's my theory
I'm
because
sure it's
it's
rooted in something like that. Yes.
some sort of indigenous wisdom. And I think that my abuela, my grandma, was really into it, but never actually, she was super, super Catholic as well. I think that both can coexist.
Mm,
And I think my tia Laura, my aunt Laura, I think she picked up those same wavelengths because she also
mm,
is very much like loves Jesus, loves whatever, and also loves Reiki and loves energy and other things like that. So
mm,
she asked me, she was like, show me what you do and how you do it. So Reiki, it's a lot of hand stuff as well and really beautiful practice. So she showed me kind of what she does. And then I showed her a little bit of what I do. And when I was doing my work on her, I noticed that an image dropped in of an arrow and it was going through her chest. And I was like,
mm.
oye tia, like, hey tia, hey Aunt Laura, I think you need to get this out. I was like, I don't know, there's an arrow, there's a flecha, an arrow in your chest. You got to get it out. I don't know what it is, but something's there and just work on it. Because I knew that she was capable of doing that. At that point, though, a week later, we found out that it was stage 4 breast cancer. And so at that point, it was too late to do the energetic work on that. It had already turned into a physical symptom that I believe started as an energetic root.
Hmm.
That's my personal opinion. And I was, of course, like, get your freaking treatments. Like, get it out. And she's fine at this moment and still going through like the final stages of treatment. But
But you
the
didn't say, "Hey, I'm gonna heal you with my hands."
no,
Okay.
no, I was like, that is way beyond my scope. Also, it's too late. We could have done that before.
Mm,
Like, that is my personal opinion. That we could have prevented the physical experience of that.
mm. And what would you say to someone who's listening who's like, "Okay, that's out there, Kimberly," right? I'm sure there's someone listening. I actually that resonates for me of like I think someone might listening might say, "Okay, that may not it doesn't matter." That resonates with me in terms of I think it's all connected.
Yeah.
But if someone's listening who's thinking, "Okay, that's too out there for me." What would you say to that person to help them stay open?
Oh,
to,
I think if it's too out there for you, that's totally okay. Like,
yeah.
because this isn't, I don't think that,
Or what if someone who's thinking, ooh, there's a little something there.
right.
And then
Yeah.
there's also
Here's,
little resistance. So like,
right.
whoa, yeah, maybe that's a
What I
better
would
question.
say, well, the first thing I'll say is wherever you're feeling the resistance in your body, place a hand there right now while you're listening to us and just like feel into it. Whether you decide that this is maybe something that could work for you or somebody you know or not, resistance is a beautiful thing that shows us where we are not open. And it's just so that the energy keeps flowing as you listen. So don't close the energy, your own personal energy. You can
Mm-hmm.
decide whether this is something you can be proactive in your choices and also not close off your own personal energy. Staying open with your energetic flow is great. Sometimes when we feel the resistance, some part of us knows that something that we're resisting is true. And
Mm-hmm.
here's something that I'll say. Before I got into all this spiritual stuff and energy healing, I was having weird little like seizures in Panama, like
Mm-hmm.
before I quit my job. And I had, right when I got to Panama, the country that I was doing operations and the director stuff from, I had this like chronic sinus thing going on. And I even towards the end of my time there had weird skin stuff going on. And then once I left, everything disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
My question to anybody listening is, have you had an experience like that in your life? And if so, you've already experienced that how energetics and emotions can influence the physical. And in my tia Laura's case, in my Aunt Laura's case, there was a situation that I think really informed this kind of heart chakra physical symptom that wasn't cleared in the moment. And it just kept getting stuffed underneath. And look at that. We have a ball of hard cells that form from this density, this literal density
Mm-hmm.
physically that comes from an energetic, not always really look into your own physical health with your doctor, but a lot of times the energetic density can become, not always, but it can become a physical density that can show up in a different variety of ways, not always cancer. It's like the worst case scenario. And also something that I think people could be more aware of. Like my mom, for example, has always struggled with throat stuff, throat chakra stuff, both emotionally and physically. And like feeling the lump in her throat, feeling like she can't speak up, feeling like she can't say this or say that. And so the emotional side of it, in her experience, she got thyroid cancer twice and also has a lot of like sinus stuff and throat issues that pop up, just congestion or this and that. And so now I ask her, I'm like, hey, like, where do you feel like you need to speak up a little bit more? Or where
Hmm.
do you feel this in the throat? And is there, can I help you take some of it out? And we kind of try to alleviate the energetic density so that something else doesn't pop up in its place. And again, this is stuff that for me seemed super wild in the beginning as well. And also as I move forward with my own family and friends and clients and just seeing everybody tap into this a little bit more for themselves, I think that energy is here to help you. This is my core belief. Your
Mm.
energy is here to help you and it wants to heal you. It wants to help you and alleviate whatever is happening, whether it's a physical symptom, a mental symptom, or an emotional symptom. It wants to help you heal. And the way that we can do that is to make sure that the energy is flowing well within the body. And that can look like exercising every day. It can look like showering every day. It can look like eating healthy food. It can look like working with some of the techniques like putting a hand on the body and letting the energy flow through. There's so many ways to do energy healing, and we don't necessarily call it energy healing, but all of it is healing when you feel the flow of energy in the channel being opened.
That I am learning so much. It's so interesting. And I'm sure everyone listening is feeling the same. There's so much there to explore. What would you say if someone's wanting to learn a little more? Is there
I
something you recommend?
Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to somatics, there's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score. So if you're
Mm.
really interested in the first part of the conversation, body-based wisdom and somatics and how that can inform our
And that's like
overall
a
health.
bestseller, isn't it?
Yes, it's like very popular. Overall health and wellness, like I think you really like that. If you feel really called to dive into energy healing
Mhm.
with like visuals, I have a lot of videos on my YouTube channel that I think would be really helpful. I personally don't see a lot of people doing like tutorials on how to do energy healing. And so I
Mm,
don't have many recommendations. My own YouTube stuff and working with me, if that feels like
yeah.
something that people want to do. And I'm trying to, I really want to like try to like think of other resources. But here's what I will do. If I do think of other ones, I'm going to send them to you so you can put them in the show notes because
Okay.
I
Yeah.
think that, like you said, this is something that not many people know how to talk about or even know how to find a conversation about. So yeah, thank you, first of all, for opening up the space for your listeners to even get a taste of what this is like. And again, this is something that I do feel really passionate about and do feel really strongly about. And also, there's so many different sides to you and me, and so many different dimensions of like all of these different passions that we were put on this planet to impart and to teach
Mm,
about, going back to the teacher archetype. So I think that energy healing can be one part of that for you so that you are here to do the work that you are meant to do in a way that feels really good in the body and really good energetically for you. As long as you feel like, yes, like your heart's open, like you feel like your belly and your stomach is relaxed and your
mm,
headspace is clear, like that's the type of feeling that I want for everybody doing the kind of work that they are born to do. Like they just want
mm,
to open up to
mm.
that expansion in their system.
Thank you, Kimberly. Where can
Mm.
people learn more about you? Or how can people work with you?
Yeah, so you can go to my website, www.kimberlylucht.com. So my name, Kimberly, and then my last name, lucht.com. And there you'll find like a spread of the YouTube videos I was talking about, plus like free resources like the Soulful Business Roadmap, the Abundant Coach Masterclass. It's like a smorgasbord. So just pop on over. There's a bunch of fun stuff over there. And of course, DM me on Instagram too at Kimberly Lucht if you have any additional questions, because this is definitely just a scratch the surface type of vibe. And if you have any questions that we didn't cover today, you're more than welcome to pop in there too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much, Lupe. So
You're
fun.
welcome.